for higher education. I was sharing with two of my colleagues the fact that last night at the opening dinner for this conference, the dinner was at the Golden State Museum. My wife and I arrived a few minutes early and had a little time, so we went through the current exhibit at the Golden State Museum, and there's a section on education. And as you might imagine, we spent a little more time at that section than some of the others. And as we were looking through it, I found a picture. It was dated April 27th, 1960, and it was a picture of Pat Brown and Clark Kerr and Glenn Dumke and Arthur Coons, who was from Occidental College at that time and chaired the master plan team. And they had gathered together in a room, and I remember it because I was at the other end of the room watching. I'm dating myself ever so slightly. They were signing the document creating the master plan for higher education in California, which later was adopted by the legislature, and we know that as the Donahoe Act. Many people over the years have characterized the California Master Plan as one of the truly significant steps taken by any society in the history of the world to provide for broad-based access to higher education for a whole population, a whole society. And that's what the Master Plan was meant to do, as it was developed by individuals, I was about to say long before our time, but I'm not sure I can say that about myself. Anyway, I was only 3. The Master Plan has been studied, analyzed many, many different ways. It's been reviewed by individuals from many nations in the world. Particularly in the early years of the Master Plan, California was a place visited by higher education leaders, public policy leaders, leaders in government from many nations around the world and from most states around this country, as societies generally began to figure out what now is commonplace in our language, but was sort of a novel idea 40 years ago. And that is the notion of a knowledge-based society, a society where the closeness or almost the intimacy of relationships between the higher education enterprise and all dimensions of the life of a society is transparent virtually. Today's session, this session, is a session where we are going to be taking a look with 3 colleagues who are in positions of major leadership in the 3 public segments of higher education here in California. We're going to be taking a look at the Master Plan for Higher Education for the 21st century. There is underway, as most of you know, a general and broad-based review, not only of California's Master Plan for Higher Education, but in a context of a review of all of education in California and an attempt to develop a master plan for all of education, everything from preschool to postgraduate, postdoctoral education. That effort is being led by colleagues in the state legislature, the principal one of whom is running for re-election right now and couldn't be with us today. A senator named Dee Dee Alpert, who many of you know or know of. We have here today to look at the master plan for the 21st century, Dr. Bryce Harris, who is the chancellor of the Los Rios Community College District here in Sacramento. He was president of Fresno City College before coming here, and was before that in Kansas City, where in addition to being president of the community college, he ran for mayor, as I recall. So Bryce is no stranger to civic life. Dr. Bruce Darling, who is Vice President for University and External Relations at the University of California, or as I sometimes lovingly say, Brand X. And you get your turn to needle me a little bit. And Bruce was Vice Chancellor for Public Affairs in what I sometimes call the foreign ministry of a campus at the University of California at San Diego before coming to the statewide administration of the University of California a number of years ago. And lastly, David Spence, who was Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Academic Officer of the California State University. Before coming to California, what is actually only 2.5 years ago, it just seems like 10 or 15. And I mean that very positively. I've enjoyed working with you. He was in essentially the same role at the university, at the Florida State Higher Education System, and prior to that was Vice Chancellor at the university at the Georgia State Higher Education System. Our colleagues are going to go in alphabetical order, and they're going to be addressing two questions. The first question, what do you think the top 3 issues particular to your system, to the University of California, to the California Community Colleges, to the California State University, the top 3 issues particular to your system that need to be addressed by the year 2010, a time arbitrarily picked. And what would be your ideal solution to these issues? And then secondly, what would be the top 3 issues affecting all of the higher education enterprise in this state, not particular necessarily to your system, that need to be addressed by that same time, 2010, and what would be an ideal solution to those issues. Each one of our presenters will proceed, and they're going to go in alphabetical order, which saves drawing straws, and we will have substantial time for discussion. And I trust that there will be discussion and a lot of participation from all of you who are here. So let me turn first to our good colleague, Bruce Darling from the UC system.
Thank you, Don. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a little odd to be on the other side of the room from you. I'm accustomed to being in those chairs looking up here, and I never realized quite how far the gulf is between members of the audience until this morning. I'd like to just make a few additional comments to those of Don about the master plan, because in the 1960s, when it was adopted, I think only about 10% of Americans had college degrees. And there was a prevalent view in the United States, particularly among higher education leaders, that higher education should be restricted to a very small segment of the population, those who by birth, by socioeconomic status, by intellectual acumen, merited higher education, and that the rest is not that important for society for others in society to receive one. It's much more like the European model, models in other parts of the world where an elite received a higher education and the rest of the population was not viewed as needing one. So the master plan in that regard really was revolutionary in a sense. It was the first time a state or a nation had chosen to extend the privileges and the rights of a higher education to the vast majority of the populace. In that sense, I think one could say that it's a natural extension of the Bill of Rights and many of the other formative documents that established the United States. With that in mind, then, we've come a long way. I believe now about 25% of Americans have a college degree, but clearly the benefits of much more broad access to a higher education are evident everywhere, and the demands by industry for people to have those educations are such that the pull is very, very strong. Now, in view of those remarks, then, what are the challenges we face? And rather than break them down into 2 separate categories, I'm just going to say that the issues that we see for the University of California, I think are probably the ones that I would say are the same issues and challenges that face higher education in general. And those are the changing population dynamics of California, and particularly the growth in the number of college-age population, something that's not too similar from the period of time when the master plan was adopted in the late 1950s and early 1960s. The second issue would be the disparity of educational preparation for college and the resulting disparity in opportunities that result, both in terms of opportunities for higher education and opportunities throughout life that result from that. And the third would be the demands by a very vibrant technology community for a level of scientifically trained employees that is probably greater than any of us altogether can marshal the forces to provide. So those are the three challenges that I would mention, and then let me just say a few words about each of those. As you know, California's population is changing in a number of ways. We are the state that I believe has the highest percentage of its population being immigrants from other nations. We are the state that has the fastest growing non-white population in the state, and there are projections that the Latino community will become a majority within a short period of time. And then we're also faced with this tremendous surge once again in students now going through K through 12 who will be looking for an opportunity to attend one of California's colleges and universities in the next decade. All of these forces combine to mean that we as institutions of higher education have to figure out how to adapt our institutions to meet both the traditional population that we've served, but also the new population that will be coming to us and looking for its place and the benefits that it derives from citizenship in this state. We alone are facing, well, all of higher education will face about 700,000 additional students between now and 2010, which is enormous growth. I think the biggest growth, both in terms of numbers and percentage, will be at the community colleges first, followed by CSU second and UC third. But at UC alone, that will be about 63,000 new students over the next decade. That means about a 43% increase in our student body during that period of time. That's equivalent to the same growth we've had over the last 30 years in the University of California. So we're condensing 30 years of growth into a 10-year period. And we're doing so without building 3 new campuses, which is what we did in the 1960s to accommodate that growth. So this is going to present a very significant challenge to us, both in our ability to become more efficient in the use of the dollars that we have, and then to establish the kind of compact with the state to make sure that the state continues to provide funding at the same level per student that it has done in the past. The other thing I might mention is that that growth is equivalent to the creation of a new UC Berkeley and a new UCLA together in a period of 10 years. So that gives you some concrete measure of what we're facing. The solutions for us are not, there is no single solution, but it's a combination of solutions that we're going to face. And I'm going to just focus on the enrollment growth for the moment. We can talk about the other issues later in the discussion period. But we're going to expand dramatically the use of summer session. While we now rent out our dormitories for a number of activities during the summer to make sure that we can keep the costs for our students low during the year, we're going to be encouraging summer use throughout this period of time. Berkeley's already begun an innovative program of paying students $500 if they're a couple of courses shy of receiving a bachelor's degree, and that money would be applied toward their costs of going to summer school so that we could basically free up fall, winter, and spring space by encouraging students who are close to a degree to complete the degree during the summer. We'll be having a number of other programs throughout the summer as well. We'll be expanding a number of our off-campus opportunities, including study abroad, study in our Washington, D.C. center, and we're hoping over time to build a program here in Sacramento to thereby increase opportunities for students, but also to free up space on our campuses to accommodate this period. We're going to be emphasizing a decrease in the time to graduation from the time that a student enrolls, and we're currently running, students take about 4 years and 1 academic quarter to finish. And we're going to be trying to move that down, and believe it or not, slight decreases in that time to degree will actually increase the number of opportunities for new students to come in a rather significant manner. And then we're going to make use of technology in various ways so that we can provide online courses to students so that they will not all have to be in the classroom. And then lastly, although it won't have an impact until midway through the decade, we'll be opening a new university at UC Merced, which by 2010 will absorb about 5,000 new students. The main issue for our ability to do this is, as I said, resources, particularly capital resources. And so for us, it's crucial during this next budget session that we reach agreement with the governor and the legislature on a new bond issue for higher education that will enable us to build the physical facilities to accommodate all these students, because with our present facilities, even if we operated them from the earliest in the morning to late at night, we simply could not accommodate this enrollment growth. And we can say more about that later. The second item I'd like to mention is the disparities in preparation, as I spoke of before. California has some of the very best high schools and elementary schools in the nation, and it also has some of the worst in the nation. And many of the students who are going to be looking for college opportunities are unfortunately live in areas where the only opportunities they have are the schools that don't have teachers, don't have the kind of qualified teachers, don't have the same kind of opportunities that other students enjoy. And this is reflected in another point, which is that California has one of the highest college going rates, but it has one of the lowest rates of students who complete the bachelor's degree of any state in the nation. And one of the reasons is that clearly students come into higher education, either aren't prepared to complete, but don't persist to completion. So what as employers create a premium on a college degree, what we want to make sure is that students are able to be admitted to a university, have the preparation to continue and succeed in that preparation. The Proposition 209 changed matters for the University of California and for all of us dramatically. We now have to look at how we reach out to those schools, those underperforming schools, which are often rural schools, inner city schools, other schools with which we have not, in the University of California, had great contact, to see how we might enrich the opportunities for those students so that they can attend the university. Our solutions are a much more robust program of the university participating in the schools, not waiting for the students to come to us, but actually engaging in activities at the K through 12 level through a variety of outreach programs where we actually have programs in place that set up curricula, guide students, and enrich their academic program. Secondly, in conjunction with the CSU and the privates, we have a major effort underway to help CSU, which is the primary producer of teachers, enrich their knowledge about their specific fields during the summer. So together we have held this past summer a series of workshops around the state in mathematics, K through 12 reading, writing instruction, so the teachers receive the best possible instruction from their own peers who are master teachers and from what the universities have to offer to enrich their skills so that when they go back to the classroom, their students will receive the benefits of their continued learning and continued improvement of their performance. Lastly, I mentioned as I said before, the tremendous demand by the technology sector for a high-tech workforce. The university is very mindful of this because the state of California is now the nation's science and technology leader. We have more science and technology activity going on than most nations. This is very evident when you look at the workforce and the opportunities that occur for workers who have these skills. The salaries are considerably higher. The unemployment rate is considerably lower. And now the issue is, can we provide enough well-trained citizens to assume these jobs? And frankly, we've not been able to keep up. One of the ways that we're seeking to do that, one of our solutions, is that we've engaged in a collaboration with the state to increase by 50% the number of our students who are majoring in computer science or engineering, both at the undergraduate and graduate degree. We're creating in every one of our research programs strong incentives for undergraduates and graduates to participate in those research programs so that we're focused on research being a training ground for skill development for undergraduate and graduate students. And then we're working with the governor on a series of new institutes for science and innovation, of which in late October, he will announce 3 of these to make sure that these major research centers that will be about $300 million a year each will have a major educational component that will not only draw in our students, but even students below college level to try to address this workforce shortage. I think I've probably exhausted my time, and so I'd like to let Dawn turn to our other colleagues, and then we can talk about these issues further in the question and answer session.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Bryce Harris.
Thank you. I'm going to use a little technical aid to turn out one light, but it's not, if you do drop off, snore softly. I suspect you'll find a lot of similarity in the comments of the group today, and certainly that will be the case from what you heard from my colleague at the university and what I will share with you. Just a very quick piece of information about our organization. Some of you may not be familiar with community colleges. This system in Greater Sacramento includes 3 colleges and soon to be a 4th.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Bottom of that's dropped off. The 4th college that you don't see up there is Sacramento City College. Please don't tell my colleagues I left. At any rate, we currently enroll about somewhere around 65,000 students in the district and encompass about 2,400 square miles. So we are a very large community college district. Simply put, our, this is really going to be a challenge. Keeps dropping all of it off. Our challenges are, the 3 challenges we have are 2 that you see and 1 that's on the bottom. The 2 challenges we face in the future are certainly quality, and at foremost in everything that we do is the success of our students. If our students don't succeed, then obviously we don't succeed. At the same time, we're concerned about the quality of what we do. We are growing at a dramatic rate, and you heard my colleague at the university say the same thing, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But underpinning all of this is the issue of resources. We certainly have a resource challenge, and if we're unable to solve that, these other 2 challenges will become extremely difficult for us. Let's talk a minute about the quality initiative first. When you look at California's community colleges, like higher education across the country, we're being increasingly accountability driven. In the case of California's community colleges, the state legislature has given us the first qualitative money that we have seen in many, many years in a program called Partnership for Excellence. That initiative suggests that we make progress in 5 goal areas, the first of those being student transfer. And you have heard an awful lot of discussion about student transfer in California over the last couple of years, and I suspect we'll hear a great deal more, including a very courageous announcement by the president of the university just in the last couple of days about a mechanism to use California's community colleges as a conduit for the balance of the top 12% of graduating classes from across the state accessing the university system in sort of a guaranteed approach, and we're really excited about that. In addition to student transfer, the issue of the completion of degrees and certificates. There are a myriad of reasons that students come to our institutions, and only a portion of them are there for the purpose of completing a degree or certificate, but it is amazing how much of a litmus test that becomes not only for the public in general, but especially for legislators and opinion leaders, and so that is something on which we are focused, obviously. Third is successful course completion by way of looking at a way that our students succeed, not only in terms of completing individual courses, but returning one semester after another. This one may drop off. A fourth one is workforce development, and we obviously are a huge part of the engine in training a technological workforce for California business and industry. If you look at a typical organization and you put a sort of a pyramid of their workforce, perhaps the top 10 to 20% of that workforce will have the bachelor degree or higher, and the bottom 10% of that workforce will have less than a high school diploma, and the lion's share of that workforce requires education beyond high school, but not necessarily completion of a bachelor degree or higher. Now that dramatically differs depending on the kind of business. Intel, for example, right up the street here, the bachelor degree and higher is a huge chunk of their workforce, and then some other manufacturing companies, it may be different altogether. But the point being that California's 106 community colleges have a tremendous share of responsibility for workforce development. And then finally, you can't see it all, basic skill development, which is a role that we take on gladly and think we are quite good at, and that is a qualitative measure that we need to continue to pay attention to. Students who've been either have not received the training they needed in the first 12 years of school, or like most of us have been out of high school for a year or two, and if we had to go back into a freshman algebra course would be in serious trouble. So that is an issue for us. The second one of those three issues being growth, just to give you a snapshot of one district, ours. As I told you, we were supposed to have 60,000 students this year, and we'll probably have about 67,000 by the end of the calendar year. We will grow, similar to the university, by 50% in 10 years. We'll have 90,000 students in this district alone by 2010, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 105,000 by 2015. That is a phenomenal growth rate for any kind of organization. It is extremely dramatic for higher education, which doesn't often change that rapidly. To give you an idea, we're currently growing somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 students a year. The average private liberal arts college in America enrolls about 1,200 to 1,400 students. So we're growing a college or more a year in terms of the equivalent of our enrollment growth. It's a very dramatic print. How are we going to handle that growth? In a number of ways. For us, it means about 40,000 students between now and 2015, perhaps more than that. We're going to continue to use leased facilities and temporary facilities that we think will handle about 10% of our growth. We are certainly going to continue to enhance our schedule. We now operate instruction in the district about 320 days of the year. We have the largest Sunday program in Sac City, I think in the state, and perhaps in the country. We offer classes from 7 in the morning until 10 at night. We, however, will be able to do more of that. We'll be able to do more early in the morning. The late afternoon, we'll do a little bit more. We certainly will be able to do a little bit more off-schedule stuff on the weekends. We have a 2, a 4, a 6, and an 8-week summer session now. We probably will enhance those a bit. We're looking at the possibility of a trimester system, not unlike the quarter system at the university, again, in order to sort of reconfigure and utilize our facilities as much as possible. We think maybe we can get another 14% of our growth that way. Technology addition, and this is really a guesstimate. We're doing more online instruction and television instruction each and every semester. We think it can handle 8% of our growth. There are those who say that 8 should be 18 or 28. It's very difficult to say. It's 8 conservatively based on a couple of things. One being there are many of us who've been in the business long enough to remember that distance education was going to make our colleges look like train stations, or we weren't going to have anybody around, and that certainly has not been the case. Secondly, California's community colleges have a real role to play in providing students with a campus-based experience. So I'm not certain it's in the best interest of our students to take 40, 60, 80% of an associate degree in a non-campus-based environment. However, if they could take of 62 units, if they could take 6 or 8 units in a non-campus-based environment, over time that would account for about 8% of our enrollment. A fourth way is enhanced efficiency. We currently have an average class size of around 32 or 33 students per class. We can inch that up a bit. We have to be careful with that because, as you heard me say, the first issue is quality. We've got to be careful we don't jack those class sizes up and begin to see that thing get out of skew. And then you won't see it, but what that leaves left over of that 40,000 students is about 26,000, even after all those interventions that in our district alone that we're not sure how we're going to handle. We're doing some things to try to deal with that. We are planning a 10 to 15 year, $480 million capital program in our district alone to try to handle this growth. But as you can imagine, finding the resources for that are difficult. This is another way of looking at that growth. The bottom bar shows our physical capacity to handle students right now. Those next two bars show how technology and scheduling enhancements will improve that. And that orange bar is our enrollment. So that gap is what we are terribly worried about. Let me say one more word about that. At the heart of the American Community College is the concept of open access. If you want to get into higher education, there's supposed to be a community college available for you. That is perhaps the most terrifying thought for someone who's passionate about community colleges, is that students will come and we will have no place to put them. Now, will we turn them away? No. But it means that your son or daughter or your neighbor or yourself who wanted to do an associate degree in 2 years and then go to California State or UC will do it in 4 or 5 years. And if they don't solve their space problems, that 4-year degree could easily turn into an 8 or 10-year program. As you can imagine, a morass in the state in terms of training a workforce, a high level of frustration of not only students but parents and business and industry. So it is really a concern. Resources, you can't see it, it's down there below that bar. It sort of underpins all of this. And when we look at California's community colleges, the average funding for community colleges in America is about $6,700 per student, and in California, we're funded at $4,202. Now, I'd love to sit here and tell you that we are so efficient and so effective that that doesn't make a difference. But in our district alone, if that gap were closed tomorrow, that would mean $10 million more that we would have to educate our students. And by the way, it's really exacerbated over that because we have differential funding in California's community colleges, and we're what's called a low revenue district, which means that other districts get paid to do the same thing we do at a higher rate. So that 10 million really is probably closer to 14 or 15 million if everything were equalized. And so those are the three issues: quality, growth, and resources. And anybody who understands organizational theory will tell you that whether it is a high-tech company or a service business, a manufacturing company, or a higher education institution, getting bigger and better at the same time is a very difficult challenge. So on the one hand, we are trying to improve graduation rates, course success rates, transfer rates, and at the same time, we're growing by 50% in 10 years. It is a daunting challenge, and if there are, on top of that, inadequate resources, it will be extremely difficult. Thank you.
Bryce, thank you very much for another interesting presentation. And now David Spence on behalf of the California State University.
Thank you, Don. I'm going to say some of the same things or address some of the same issues that Bruce and Bryce have, and then add a couple of others. The main issues, at least as many of us see them, for that center on CSU, California State University, concern access, and particularly access to the baccalaureate degree. And Bruce unfortunately is right. We're either 48th or 49th the last time I looked in terms of baccalaureate degree production per population. And another interesting figure is that we're near the bottom in terms of geographical access, at least to public senior institutions in the country. I've just been out here, I guess, 2.5 years, and it's amazing how large and vast this state is, both geographically and the number of people. And what we have 20, soon to be 23 CSUs and 8, 10, let's say 10, that only puts us, when you put it against the population and the size of this state, that is a very low number of senior public universities per capita. There's many reasons for why California is low in baccalaureate degree per capita. One is, as we know, our high school graduation rate is relatively low compared to other states. I mentioned we really don't have comparable geographical access to at least senior institutions compared to other states. Our community colleges really have a lesser emphasis, relative emphasis on the transfer degree than many other community college systems. And our articulation system, which I'm going to spend some time on in a second, is actually pretty good compared to other state systems. However, because our system concentrates or relies on the community college transfer to really an unprecedented extent in the country, it can't just be pretty good. It's got to almost be perfect, and it's far from perfect. The result is really not enough students getting the baccalaureate degree. And increasing the baccalaureate degree production is critical to California, as Bruce and Bryce have said, workforce, economy issues. And also, this would be a terrible time to lessen our focus or any intensity on providing access or increasing access just at the time when California is really becoming a state, one of the, one or two or three states in the nation where heretofore minorities are really majority. And this would be exactly the wrong time to not redouble our efforts. There are several issues that we think are very important at CSU. The first is we need to do our part in increasing the preparation levels of students while they're still in college, and this roughly refers to what Bruce was talking about with outreach. Ours is a little different challenge, however. Our problem is that we try to meet, and we do meet, the very, very laudable master plan goal of taking the top third of the high school class in any one year. That right now calculates to our taking in all students who apply and have a B high school average, a 3.0 GPA, and have taken the right, 15 courses, I guess, the college preparatory pattern. Our problem is that even with those criteria having been met, about 2/3 need some form of further preparation before they begin college. 48% need a little extra help in math, 47% in English. You know, I would just add, having worked in several other states and state systems, this is not unique to California. In fact, I happen to believe that really, particularly with respect to math, because our math standard is really pretty significant for placement in CSU, that we're not really as bad as we sometimes think we are. So anyway, outreach to the public schools. And we've been trying a new approach, in the past couple of years, and the legislature has helped us out with this. We have found that it's simply not enough to send reports to the high schools about how many students were prepared adequately or how many needed further preparation. We find that what we have to do is to have personal contact with the high schools, particularly the high schools. So what we're doing is we're sending our math and English faculty to meet with, on a very interactive personal basis, with the math and English teachers in the schools. The new approach emphasizes really focus. We have picked out for the last year the 150 high schools that send us the most students needing remedial education. We're focusing on those. We're focusing on math and English. This is really a true partnership with the schools. It's overseen by a statewide committee that's jointly chaired by one of our presidents and the chair of the state superintendency, State Association of School Superintendents. The goal of it is to address the lack of understanding and really the lack of embrace of the high school math and English teachers about what CSU standards are. What does it take to really meet the CSU standards in math and English? It's obviously not just taking the right 3 courses and getting a B average. So we're finding that we really have to go out there and have that kind of interaction. Finally, the other, and it really is a new focus for these kinds of outreach efforts, is the accountability portion. Because we have limited these, or we have the funding to concentrate on a certain number of high schools, we know what they are, we know they're paired with a certain one of our campuses, we can follow the increase, we hope, in the percentage of students who are prepared coming out of these, and our future funding will depend upon that. A second major issue for us that Bryce mentioned is the whole status of the transfer process, particularly with respect to California State University. I've worked in states, Florida being the primary example, where I thought we depended on the community college transfer relationship an awful lot. It can't compare to California. California State University relies on the community college transfer more than any other state in the nation by a factor of 2, at least 2. We take 2 transfers for every first-time freshman we take in. California has the highest percentage. If you just look at the students in the first 2 years, the lower division, freshman and sophomore years, across all of public higher education, California has the highest percentage that are located in the community colleges. Nearly two-thirds of our graduates in any one year from California State University have started at the CSU. I can tell you there's 25 or 30 states in the nation where that figure is no higher than 10 to 15%. So we are joined at the hip with the community colleges. We have to have an almost perfect articulation system. We do pretty well in general education. Over the years, we've worked together, including UC, and we do pretty well. Student starts in any one of the community colleges, takes the 30 to 39 hours of general ed. That's going to transfer. If the community college say it's okay, that's going to be accepted in any one of our CSU campuses. We have to remember that improving this is difficult. Anytime a student has to move from one sector to another, it's a dislocation. And we do know that the states that do emphasize the community college transfer more than others tend to have lower baccalaureate degree production. And the reason is we just don't work hard enough at it. But it can work, and it will take hard work. I just mentioned 2 ways we're going at it. One, it's our responsibility at CSU, and the other, it's really a joint responsibility between the community colleges and our university. The first is that with the help of the faculty, I see Christy out here and others, we are going to, in one way or another, if we don't do it, the legislature is going to tell us to do it, develop a transfer degree for each one of 15 to 20 popular majors. So by the time we have that, we'll have the general education component that's completely transferable, and then we will have specified the 5 or 6 or 7 major related courses that a student would take as a freshman or sophomore in the community college that would be similar. The requirement would be similar across all of our CSU campuses, because that's been a major problem. Many community college students don't know where they're going to end up when they start in a community college, and if they don't take exactly the right courses, they lose credit. We're doing a transcript study. We have pulled the transcripts of 2,000 recent graduates who started at the community colleges. I'm afraid that the average number of hours that have taken, that we'll find these students actually take upon graduation is probably going to be well over 150, 160, and well over 90 probably even at the community college. So we've got a lot of room for improvement there, and that's going to be a real challenge for our system. The other point is that we would like to work with the community colleges, and I think the recent move by the University of California will help this in using several different strategies for increasing the distinctiveness of the community college transfer degree. And I think, and Bryce will correct me, I'm sure, if it's not accurate, but I was rather surprised when I got out here that there wasn't a distinctive transfer degree, because in most states the AA degree is only used for transfer. In fact, you don't even get into the AA degree unless you're going to transfer. Here, everything that's a degree is really under the AA, and some community colleges don't really have that kind of distinctive sort of track. So I think the discussions have begun, and I think that will really help students, get more students into the transfer track. I'm just going to mention a couple other things. Those were the two major issues. I do want to say this, that we think our campuses, our system can do a lot better in terms of actually graduating students once they come to us, either as first-time freshmen and transfer students. We can do more to help students graduate. As we've looked at our graduation rates carefully, they're comparable. If we take into account the kinds of students we get and all that, ours are very comparable with other campuses across the, across the nation. But we can do better, and CSU has a mission because of our emphasis on teaching and learning and working closely with students and teaching related scholarship. We are sure, if we get the kind of support, increase the graduation rates. I will talk about the increasing capacity. That was really the third issue. Many of the things we're trying to do are similar to Bryce and to what Bruce has mentioned, year-round operations, state support, more use of Friday, Saturday, Sunday classes, use of technology-assisted instruction. I will say this, our system has, I think, developed a pretty good policy on this. Right now, less than 2% of our coursework is offered fully now through some kind of technology-assisted instruction. Now, we have many courses that are mixed, that may have, 2 lectures that are online and then a face-to-face meeting, which is, probably the most common. We have left this up to the faculty. The faculty are going to choose when it makes sense to use technology-assisted instruction. And the only rule is that they're going to hear from the Chancellor's office or the board is the same or more quality. As long as you can certify that it's at least the same quality or higher, we will support it. We'll try to get the infrastructure. I will say this, we're not going to save any money doing this. What we're finding is that it's increasing faculty members' time, it's increasing interaction with students. The positive effect is probably going to be more positive on quality than cutting costs. although it could increase some capacity and maybe cut down on some capital costs. Final point about capacity. The board looked very closely over the past year, and President Girth will relate to this since he chaired the system group that also looked into our policies on enrollment management. CSU has made a commitment that if a student desires to stay home or in his or her own region or local area to go to college, there will be space for that student. The local regional student has priority. But at the same time, the board made it clear in those cases where there is enrollment pressure, the board will do everything it can to get the resources to expand capacity where the students are. Much of this future capacity, when it involves buildings, is going to be joint branch campuses with a community college. And that will, we think, address at least two problems. One, capacity, but also the problem that California has, which is we don't have enough senior college opportunities for a student to stay home, for the place-bound student to gain access to the junior and senior year. What makes us think that students who started at a community college because they couldn't travel 60 miles or 50 miles or 40 miles, once they become juniors, they can all of a sudden do that. They're still working, they still have families. So it's going to be that kind of joint use facility where the student can just stay at one location where we're going to gain capacity in the future. Finally, just one more minute, Don. Don challenged us also, were there any other issues that might be addressed in the California master plan discussion that were national in scope as well? And I just mentioned two very briefly, and maybe this will come out in the discussion. One is, I firmly believe, having worked in several other states and systems and studied this, that there's going to be a major, major shakeout in many of our states across the nation with respect to the structure of higher education. Most states have way overbuilt their systems, trying to, and have developed many, many more research institutions or programs than are needed in the country. They're the most expensive, and we're going to find many, many other states trying to develop the same kind of system and structure that we have here, where the missions are clear. Of course, you know, it'd be nice if we could have the EDD or something like this, one of these applied degrees, but generally, this is a wonderful master plan, and more states are going to try to get closer to what we're doing, including governance through system-wide governing boards. I've worked in both different kinds of things with the coordinating board model and the governing board model, and to really get things done, there's nothing like having a consolidated governing board over a system. It's one way to get the attention of presidents.
Oh, really?
Finally, accountability. You know, I think we're doing exactly right in this state with the partnerships with the governor, getting into this on a system basis, not campus by campus. Look at the budgets in all of our states. You know, I've had a hard time saying this, living in the South for 25 years, but they're going to go south again, okay? And it could 2, 3, 4 years, and as soon as that happens, there's going to be an even increased call for accountability across the nation. Some states are almost there. Some states, they've got specific performance funding by campus, by program. We've in a joint project with the United Kingdom, and I know in Britain and also now in Germany, they have these evaluators coming around looking at all the doctoral programs and other things, and they rate them and all this stuff. And if you're not rated high, you don't get money. I mean, it's really something else. We need, in higher education, to take the initiative and to reach out to the public and the public's representatives and say, look, we're very willing to share more about what we do well and what we can do even better. And in return, we would like increased state support. But if we don't do that, when resources really get tight again, it will be done to us. I'm done.
David, thank you very much. Thank all three of you for this overview. Let's throw this open to discussion and questions and comments from the floor. And let me turn to the floor first. The gentleman in the front row.
Commented on the vast growing population of these students. But what about the higher level students who are trying to get into more competitive colleges? What do you think the effects on those students are going to be? Will they be forced to go to not quite as high level competitive colleges, or will those colleges have to expand?
Do you want to define what a high-level competitive college is?
Are you talking about UC and CSU?
Well, I would like talking about for the students who want to go to a Stanford or a Berkeley or a UCLA, a school that is very selective. You spoke to the overall number of students going to college is growing, but the level of students that are really high level, the 4.0, the people who are doing everything they can to get into college, is also growing greatly too. What do you think is going to happen to those students?
What if you want to take a stab at that?
I would just say that the university as a whole has made a commitment for, as long as the master plan has been in place, to admit students who graduate in the top 12.5% of the graduating class statewide. We've maintained that, and we intend to maintain that all the way through 2010. With regard to certain campuses being more selective, you're absolutely right. It is. Berkeley could fill up its entire freshman class with electrical engineering majors. So there is a much higher demand than there are a number of places available. And I think this has two results. One is there are going to continue to be disappointments on the part of students who have set their sights on a single campus, be it Berkeley or any other. But at the same time, I think what you're seeing now is that the gap in perceived quality between Berkeley and other unnamed campuses is narrowing. And so that, it used to be that Berkeley and UCLA alone were considered the most selective. Today, 5 years ago, it began to be Berkeley, UCLA, and San Diego. And you can look at that in terms of GPAs of entering students, SAT scores. They're coming very close into alignment. Now, beginning the last 2 years, Irvine and other campuses are beginning to move up. And so I think what you're going to find is a narrowing in the quality across the board, and students are going to have a much greater opportunity to be admitted in a Berkeley-like campus, if you want to use that term, to come back to your earlier phrase.
Don, just a couple of piggybacks. I think there are three eventualities. One, that students are increasingly going to have to look out of state if they can't find what they want in California. I think we're already seeing some of that. Secondly, I think that more and more students and their parents are understanding that a 4-year degree from Berkeley with 2 years at American River is only 70% of what it costs to go straight to Berkeley, and the degree still says Berkeley. And then the third thing that I think we're starting to see is increasingly students identify with programs within an institution, so that if a person in California wants to be a teacher, for example, they know that one of the best universities in America is Sac State. It has a long reputation of being a fine teacher training institution. And so we probably will see, as Bruce said, more of a selective approach to looking at a quality program in addition to a high reputation institution.
Tracy Weston.
I'd like to ask you a question about funding. I recall a statistic that about 80% of the tidal wave of new students, the 700,000 additional students who are coming in the next 10 years, will have to be absorbed by the community colleges. And whether or not that figure is still right, the question is, do you all agree that 80% of the new funding ought to go to the community colleges because of these statistics? And if not, what do you think the proper formula should be in allocating state funding between community colleges, state colleges, and UC in light of that 80% figure?
Which one of you wants
I'll
to
take. We just want the crumbs from UC's table, and we'll have.
All we would like is the same level of continued funding per student that we've received in the past, not anything more per student.
You know, the community colleges are in an awkward spot. You know, even on capital, there's been some discussion and even a bill recently about a different split for capital. And it occurs to me that, as my dad used to say, when you're at the table and there's not enough food to go around, everybody's manners goes out the window. And I worry a lot that we're going to refocus the debate of resources in the state on who ought to get what little there is, instead of where the debate should be, which is there needs to be adequate resources to fund higher education in California. I don't mind even a third approach in capital if we would not have a $8 or $10 billion backlog in California of higher education capital needs. So you get the backlog down to where I can build a library at Sac City in 2 or 3 years instead of 12, and then I'll be glad to take a third. Although I could argue that it ought to be higher because we are going to shoulder a lot of the burden. But we don't want to let ourselves get tricked into the who's going to get what discussion instead of the discussion about resources in California for higher education.
David?
I just you know, quickly, it's never fruitful, it's never effective. Nothing good comes when sectors or levels of higher education argue with each other. And I put the public schools in this. You know, we all go up or we all go down. And the only other thing I'd say with respect to CSU is one thing we really do need is I think we're probably the only system in the country that has graduate level education that doesn't get some differential funding for master's level work, and that's probably the most glaring discrepancy. I'm not talking about doctoral programs, I'm talking about just master's level work. So
I just want to echo that for a minute and say that all the challenges that we've talked about, I think are going to require a much higher level of cooperation among our 3 institutions than they've ever required in the past. Be that helping K through 12 with the issues that we've talked about, be that revitalizing the community, the student transfer from community colleges to CSU and UC, be that in terms of resources. If we're not focused, students are looking for a higher education. Yes, they may focus on one institution versus the other, but our obligation should be to the state of California. And if we can cooperate in the way we have begun for many years, but at an even more high level recently, I think we can benefit the state greatly. We now have with CSU, for example, have brought the course requirements in high school for a student to be admitted to our 2 institutions in line so that you take the same courses whether you're going to CSU or to UC. This new program that President Atkinson announced yesterday as a proposal that's been referred to several times is what we call a dual admission. We will actually, in the junior year of high school, we will notify students in the top 12.5% of the high school graduating class for each high school in the state that they are in that pool, and that if they complete their senior year with the right required courses, they can be admitted at that time to a community college, but also to a UC college, UC campus, and know that if they complete the community college requirements for transfer, they will have automatic guaranteed admission into a UC campus. They will know that as a junior, providing that they meet all the requirements down the line. If we can continue to find ways like that we can make it easier for students and cooperate among ourselves, I think everyone will benefit and the costs won't go up.
One of the continuing criticisms of the master plan as we know it over the last 40 years, pops up and down from time to time, is that the master plan addressed a whole host of things, but not the financing of higher education. The fact of the matter is that wasn't an accident. The master plan, the conceptualization of the master plan was the governor's, aided by a fellow named Don Leifer, who died within the last year or two, a faculty member from San Diego State at that time, who was the governor's higher education secretary. The governor was Pat Brown. And the governor's position essentially was to the master plan survey committee, you deal with the concept or with the issues having to do with the differences among you and how you collaborate and cooperate. Or some would say the heart of the master plan as we know it is the concept of differentiation of function. And the governor's position was it was his responsibility to deal with the adequacy of resources. Now, we've got a somewhat different environment. The environment, the political environment, has changed over the years, but I think we hear all three people in this panel suggesting that cooperation within some understanding about differences among us may well be the answer to the question raised.
Before you, just one quick thing, Tracy, because I mentioned our strategy about the joint use facilities with the community colleges as a way to build capacity and improve articulation. We need a funding mechanism for that. I've been in one state where they established a separate authority even to do that, to encourage it, because it's very difficult now because it's really a joint facility, and how do we get there? So this is an example where we really do need the financing mechanism to be worked out, as well as a commitment to collaborate.
Gentleman in the middle of the last row, your hand is up in the air.
Yes, thank you. First, thanks for having us all here and helping us understand some of these master plan issues. I'm hearing some things from you, and I want you to address this particular issue that I'm not hearing. As we increase high school graduates, CC transfers to CSU and UCs, what's basically going to happen? I mean, we have low FTEs compared to other states already. We're going to have an increasing student population. We find that California prisons receive tremendous amounts of funding and whatnot, but we are not building more schools. Therefore, how in the world can we keep up the quality of the educational environment?
Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Well, from the community college's perspective, as I mentioned earlier, getting bigger and better at the same time is really a challenge. If I had to put my finger on the single thing that I think will most determine that, it will be our ability in California to recruit faculty here to staff these institutions as they grow. All of the campuses in the world and all of the administrators in the world won't do a lot of good if we don't have quality faculty in those classrooms. So thus far, we've been able in California, I think, to keep our salary for faculty relatively competitive. And when you add with it the quality of life in California still tends to attract people, I think we have a little bit of an edge. But I think to some extent that's eroding pretty quickly when you look, for example, at a community college in the Bay Area that finds it virtually impossible to attract somebody from out of state to teach there when the cost of housing is so high, nobody can afford a house on a faculty member's salary. So there are some real troubling signs there, not the least of which is that when you take the retirements of a whole group of people that are moving through the system and combine those with the growth, the numbers are enormous. Our district hired 70 year before last, 70 last year. We'll hire 80 or more next year. That's a lot of faculty members. So that to me is the greatest concern that I have in terms of addressing your question. And I think if we can attract faculty, then we'll solve the building problem. At the same time, we'll be able to keep the quality up.
I would agree completely with what Bryce has just said. We're facing the need to hire 7,000 new faculty in the next 10 years, 4,000 because of the growth we're going to experience, and 3,000 just because of natural retirements. That's going to be a major issue. Thus far, we found that we're recruiting the very best faculty in the country from the best public universities and the best private universities, and so things look, exceptionally bright. But on the horizon, the increasing cost of California housing, which was also mentioned, is something that we're going to have to contend with, or we fear that we're not going to be able to keep up the pace that we have and maintain the quality that we desire and that you should expect.
I would just echo that, particularly I still think California does have an edge because of its reputation for quality as well as access. I think faculty do like to come here, but we are getting to the point too where housing and the cost of living, but it's primarily housing, is a real problem. And our board of trustees has really moved that up to the top of the priority. And they've really made some progress in the last 6 months in trying to find ways to address it.
Gentleman in the white shirt, the back.
Dr. Harris, would you comment on the concept of local control at the community college level? There has been some discussion about centralizing the governance of community colleges. Do you see that as the future?
I have an appointment that that's a very perplexing issue. At the root of the American Community College is local control. And I, along with many of the people that I work with, subscribe to that. I think that our need to be very quickly flexible to local needs is critically important. And